I want you to do me a favor. I want you to note the difference between a public game master and just a game master. A game master will run the game for his friends, family, people that are in their circle. A public game master will run the game for strangers. There is an obvious difference in the experience those two types of game masters are going to have. A public game master will meet a wider variety of players in the hobby. A game master can be very lucky, because if their friends and family are comfortable with them and each other, and they take the initiative, they pay attention, then that game master can have many, many years of great gaming, especially if the only new people coming into the system are in their circle and adjust and adapt to the other people. And I know guys who have been in the hobby for 40 years, running games for their friends, who are great at playing the game, so their experience as a game master has been amazing. The problem is, they do have a limit to their experience. They don't know what most players are going to be like in the hobby. They know what their table is like, and that's really it. And if their table is going to be similar to another table, who knows? Now, over the years, before even the internet, the majority of game masters I know were public game masters. When we get to the internet world, most game masters on the internet, and I still believe it's the same today, are public game masters running the game for people they don't know or barely know. Yet, a good majority of, say, content creators, especially in the old school part of the tabletop role-playing game hobby, they are game masters that have a limited experience just running their friends and family at home. Some of their advice can seem really off, when you're a public game master and you know how troublesome a lot of players can be, and that you'll be running into these troubled players in almost every group that you encounter, period, when you're a public game master. It's like some of their advice depends on players all being smooth and playing the game right, when a public game master knows it's not that simple. And I know some of these home game masters that don't have that experience with a lot of troubled players, if I put them out into the public field and got them to run a game for strangers, most likely they're going to collapse early on and need to really sort of relearn what they're doing. Because, when you got all players acting and behaving well for decades, it's going to be really hard to adjust to a lot of players not behaving that way at all, where you can no longer depend on the smooth gameplay or the guaranteed thing that you could with your home group. I know game masters that think, it's really easy to do this because with their home group, their players jump right in and take the initiative. They don't know that the majority of players in the hobby are not like that, and the majority of players don't have a home group, so when they're needing to play, they need to meet up with strangers, which is even more social pressure, at that stage, and they're really not going to take the initiative on just about anything. All the things that home game master is used to, it's not something a public game master is really, always going to have. It's very rare that a public game master has a group that is, that well put together. Doesn't mean we don't, it's just not that often. As a public game master, you go through the ups and downs of what the hobby really has to offer. In my opinion, you get a deeper look into what we're doing in the hobby and how things are turning out. Like, what's the outcome of these actions and things? When you're at home with your personal group, it's a lot harder to know what's going on in the overall hobby. Yet, many of these content creators will just assume that we're all having the same experience that they're having, that we all have a smooth home group ready to play the game correctly so you can do all this and it's really easy. God damn, that would be nice if that was the case. That is why my advice to those home game masters can sometimes seem a little off to them. Why would you have to do all this to get this going or these players doing that? Well, because they're not just personal friends that I've been talking to for a year or months or anything. I just met them, they're joining the game, and I have to get ready to get to know them. I'm going to have to do that through the process of running the game for them. So they're already in before I can see a lot of the flaws that might come later. I mean, look, you can do everything in your power to try to filter out, awful people. But there's only so much you can do as a public game master. So when you're taking on strangers, sometimes the bad behavior doesn't appear right away. It could happen, on session 7. Finally, they're behaving badly in a way that you can't afford to see that get repeated, but you don't even know that's coming until you're there. So it is weird to see a lot of especially old school tabletop role-playing game content creators that are home game masters when, in my opinion, the majority of game masters in 2024 are public game masters, having a completely different experience than the majority of game masters who are content creators. Well, at least for the old school. And so there can be a disconnect when they're giving out advice or telling you what they think. Because if you're a public game master, you, like me, will hear a lot of what they have to say and go, shit, it's not that easy for me. Clearly it's not that easy for you. Lucky them. I mean, they're fucking spoiled, to be honest. And it's like hearing spoiled kids. It really is. It's like when you hear them say this and this is easy when you know it's not as a public game master, it's like hearing spoiled brats talk. I mean, that's how it comes across to me. Old spoiled brats, mind you, but spoiled brats. I mean, if you give me a solid home game masters group, I mean, I have that type of cocky confidence that I'll say I could run circles around that game master. Give me a solid group and you'll be amazed with what I can do. But, I'm a soldier. I'll get out there and deal with the rough players, right? I'll deal with the hobby. And I'll provide a service for people that can't play the game. They have no friends to play the game with. If you don't have a public game master, the majority of players in the hobby who don't have a group to play with will never be able to play these games. I mean, public game masters are so fucking necessary to the hobby that if you were to degrade them in any way, I gotta say, you're not a friend of the hobby. You're doing nobody any favors. And it wouldn't matter if you're in the old school or new school, right? You're harming the entire process. Everybody should be supporting public game masters so the majority of players who don't have groups will have games to play, right? If not, if you get rid of us public game masters, then the majority of players in the hobby suddenly have no game to play, and you have a bunch of fucking spoiled fucking old brats that are sitting at home with their personal group being spoiled as fuck. I mean, I get how nice that is, but it's so inconsiderate to the entire hobby. If you're a public game master, be sympathetic to these people. Like when you hear them talking the way they do, how easy things are, just let it go. Don't get all upset. Don't take it personal. And remember, I'm here for you, right? I get how you feel because I feel the same way. So, regardless to what you might think of me, I'm going to be more sympathetic to your experience and what you're doing than these other people. And my advice or my thoughts come from the same experience that you're going through, dealing with strangers, being a public game master. So if you haven't heard a bunch of my content on tabletop role-playing games, please dig in. Please dig in. Anyway, for now, take care.